Hey there, everyone, and welcome to Journey Church Online. We're so glad to get to spend a little bit of this day with you. My name is Bryce. I'm a part of the team here at Journey. If you're a part of our Journey Church family, just want to take a quick second to say how much we miss seeing you, and we're really looking forward to being able to be back together again sometime soon. But if this is your first time to be here with us, wanted to say just how excited we are to get to spend a little bit of this day with you. We've been working on creating this online community to be a place where you could connect, where you could take some steps in your faith. And we just want to let you know that you are so welcome here in our online community. Hey, if you have any questions about Journey Church or you're just looking for someone to connect with, you could always send us a message here on Facebook, or you can email us at info@ourjourney.com. And hey, speaking of connecting, would love to have the opportunity to connect with you today. So if you would, do us a favor, drop us a comment below in the comment section. Just let us know that you're here. We'll make it easy. Let's just say that there are a lot of places that we're all kind of dying to get to once quarantine is over. So why don't we all right now jump down in the comment section. Let us know where are some of the places that you're really looking forward to going to once quarantine is lifted. Could be your favorite restaurant, could be your favorite shop, or even just a favorite park here in town. Hit us up in the comments. Let us know what you're looking forward to doing once all of this is over. And hey, one other way that we could connect today is through prayer. If there's anything that we could be praying for you about this week, please don't hesitate to message us, or you can email us at prayer@ourjourney.com. All you have to do is just send us a message. Our team will be praying for you throughout this entire week. Well, one last thing before we go, just wanted to take a quick moment and say thank you for all of you who are helping to support the ministry of Journey Church through your generosity. We've always existed to fulfill one simple mission, and that's to help people take their next step toward Jesus. We might not be able to do that in person right now, but there is a spiritual hunger and a spiritual need in people that's probably stronger than it's ever been right now. And your giving is allowing us to help keep taking steps toward that mission while we're meeting here online. So thank you for all you've been doing through that, and in your generosity. We couldn't be doing any of this without you. If you're looking for ways to give today, you can always hop over to ourjourney.com. All you have to do is click on giving on our homepage, and right there you'll find all of our online giving platforms. Well, once again, thanks for being here, being a part of our online community today. We believe that God has something He wants to say specifically to you, and we hope that you'll leave here feeling more encouraged and closer to God than ever before. Let's get ready and let's get started with Journey Church Online.
But He brought me into His love for me, His love for me. Who the Son sets free, oh, it's free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. Realize He has ransomed me, His grace arrested. My place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am.
I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am.
I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. Oh, I am who you say I am. Yes, I am who you say I am. The sun sets free. Oh, it's free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to week 3 of On Location. We're so glad you're watching with us today. Who would have ever believed or who would have ever expected that we would all be where we are today? I hate it when things don't go the way I expected them to. Truth be known, it seldom does. When I was a freshman in college, I got stuck in a room with 3 other roommates from all over the country. It's a little bit like being in the cell that we filmed from last week On Location. Just weird human beings all stuck in one room, didn't know each other. 2 of my roommates didn't get along very well. One of them, his name was Kevin. Kevin was from Michigan, and he was weird. I'm just telling you, probably because he's from Michigan. I don't know, that could be it. If you're from Michigan, sorry, but you're probably weird too. Kevin's one of those guys that just didn't fit with everybody else. For instance, every morning Kevin got up at 5 a.m. Trust me, none of the rest of us got up at 5 a.m. He also showered and then came, and while we were all sleeping, he would set up an ironing board and iron everything he was going to wear. The rest of us just tried to find clothes on the floor and put on as best we could. And then Kevin would go to breakfast, and then Kevin would come home, and then Kevin would read his Bible, and it was just a weird thing. Kevin also had a girlfriend. One of my other roommates didn't like Kevin very much. They didn't get along at all, and Kevin had pictures of his girlfriend sitting all over the room, and every day my other roommate, he would turn all the pictures around backwards, and it made Kevin really, really mad. So one day my other roommate, he decided that it would be really funny if we set all of the clocks ahead, since Kevin got up in the dark anyway, set all the clocks ahead, watches ahead, everything in the room ahead like 2 hours, and he would get up and it would be hilarious. It was this wonderful plan, and so we did, and then we all went to sleep, and then quite frankly, we didn't hear anything else that happened. The next thing we know, like at 7 o'clock in the morning, we hear this loud thud, and it sounds like a human body just hit the floor, and the reason for that is because a human body just hit the floor. And it was Kevin, and we all woke up and looked, and he's laying face down, unconscious, completely still. We kind of freaked out, and I was like, dude, see if he's alive. And he was like, no, I'm not going to touch him. And I'm like, you've got to. And so eventually we get down to check on him, and long story made short, this isn't good. Kevin is unconscious, and so we run and get somebody who's in the medical profession from down the hall, and they come and check him out, and well, it ends up that he ends up in the emergency room, and he's okay, and it's a mess. What literally happened is that Kevin got up really early. It was probably about 3 in the morning, but we didn't wake up to hear any of that, to laugh at it. And he had gotten dressed, taken a shower, ironed his clothes, gotten dressed, gone to the calf, it wasn't open, so he'd come back and gone back to bed. What we didn't know is, this is bad news by the way, that Kevin had a pretty serious medical condition and took medication, and it had to be right on schedule. And since he'd gotten up so early, he had taken them hours before he should. And as a result, he had had all these issues, and now he's on the floor, and now he's in the emergency room. This did not work out the way we expected. That's the story. By the way, if that happens, they'll call you into a conference with a lot of very important people who debate whether or not you can stay in college anymore. And I just had so many thoughts of murdering a roommate and all that stuff, which would be horrible for your future career. Bottom line is this: Kevin lived. Yeah, don't worry about it. He's fine. And he didn't like us anymore, and oddly enough moved out of our room because he just obviously held a grudge. But in the long run, what I started with a plan didn't work out the way I expected. I'm not the first person to experience that. I bet you have too. Truthfully, long before us, it happened in another place. That's what we want to talk about today. So listen to this.
When things don't work out the same way we expected them to, it leads to some pretty profound disappointments in our life. But you know what I figured out? It's pretty easy to trust God. To be honest with you, it's really easy if I just didn't have to deal with two things. If I didn't have to trust His timing, and I didn't have to trust His plan. Really trusting His power is not that big of an issue, is it? But now that I think about it, if I'm honest about it, if I don't trust His timing and I don't trust His plan, then I'm left with Him trusting my timing and my plan. That doesn't seem like the way it's supposed to work out. You know what's interesting about this is that this is a common place. In fact, this place, we're on location at Arrington Funeral Home in Jackson, and this is a place where God's timing and God's plan is most commonly reconsidered, most commonly criticized, most commonly meets its tension right here in this room in front of something just like this. The idea that our expectations play out differently than how real life plays out leaves us in a place where we're constantly questioning, constantly in tension with God's timing and His plan. There's this famous story in Scripture that is one of the more well-known stories. It's in John chapter 11. And it's the story of when Jesus raises his friend Lazarus from the dead. And the story toggles back and forth between people struggling to trust God's timing and trust God's plan. Let me just share a couple of verses with you. It's in John chapter 11, and he says this: "Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. And so when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed 2 more days." Man, that's pretty tough to imagine, that you love somebody very much and that you would love them so much that you didn't do anything about it. You ever felt that way? You ever felt like God was supposed to do something in a certain amount of timing? And that's really the struggle that we all live in, is do we trust God's timing? Well, the story goes on, and it's pretty strengthy. It's kind of big at this point because there's this tension that goes on. When are we going to go? When are we going to go? And then after a little bit of time, Jesus decides, and he tells the disciples what he's going to do. He says, "Let's go back to Judea. But Rabbi, a short while ago the Jews there tried to stone you, and you want to go back." If you jump down a couple of verses, he says this to him. He says, "So he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead." That's a strong statement, isn't it? Lazarus is dead. The man I cared about so much that I sat here for 2 days, and I didn't do what anyone wanted me to do in my timing. And now my plan doesn't make any sense. I want to go back to a place where they tried to stone me just a few days ago. And he tells them, "Let's go back to Judea." And they say to him, so they told him plainly, "Lazarus is dead. And for your sake, I'm glad I was not there, so that you might believe. But let's go to him." And then Thomas. Now listen, I love Thomas. People call him Doubting Thomas. They call him Didymus here. It means that he's the twin. But what's interesting here, he says, Thomas, also known as Didymus, said to the rest of the disciples, this is great. He says, "Let us go that we may die with him." I love sarcasm in any way, but loving it when Thomas goes, "Fine, let's go. We'll all die. It'll be great. I can't wait to get this done." It's tough for Thomas because not only does he have to trust his timing, now he has to trust his plan. You ever struggle there? Not just God's timing playing out, but you're looking at it going, man, that's not what I would do. That's not how I would have my marriage go. That's not how I'd have my money go. That's not how I'd have my business go. None of what we're experiencing right now, even this moment where you're sitting on your couch and you're watching me talk on a screen, none of this is how we would have it go. But God has different timing and a different plan. And if we didn't have to trust those things, man, trusting God would be really simple. You know, it's interesting as the story kind of continues to unfold and we jump through a few more verses. It says this: he gets to this place where his friend Lazarus has died. And it's been several days, actually 4 full days now. And Jesus shows up on the scene and he talks to one of the sisters and he says, your brother will rise again. Now, like, if you've ever been in a place like this, there's always been somebody standing in front of a casket. And there's this long line of people, and they come up and they say these things that are supposed to be comforting, right? They say, oh, well, all things work together for good for those who love God, right? And it'll all work. And we want so badly to be comforting that we just reach for these words. But Jesus says these words that are supposed to be comforting to her, and she acknowledges it. She says, I know that he will rise again on the last day. Now, in the real world, words like that aren't that comforting, right? They don't really kind of answer the big tension of God's timing and plan, does it? Because we kind of use them in like spreading it over, just making it easy for me to get out of this awkward conversation. But that's not what Jesus is doing. Jesus is revealing a little bit more about his timing. He's like, listen, there's going to be a day when all this comes together and you'll see that it's going to be great. And she doesn't have any clue, none whatsoever, what's about to happen. That God's timing is going to be perfect for them. And they have no idea, because their timing would have been that he showed up on time, and that he showed up in their time and healed Lazarus. And their timing and their plan would have been that this moment, this consoling statement of one day your brother is going to be alive again, would have never happened. But Jesus leans in and just says simply, you got to trust my plan. So we got to trust God's timing. We got to trust God's plan. We got to trust God's timing. You see where we're going here, right? Because the story begins to unfold. She goes back into her sister and she says, hey, the Rabbi Jesus, the Messiah, is here to see you. And she immediately jumps up and she leaves the room. Her sister does. And everybody in the room thinks that she's this person who's going to go out and grieve, maybe at the graveside or and so they want to be consoling. And so they jump up and they follow her. And when they do, I want you to see what they have to say. It says, they see Jesus, and it says, it's my favorite verse in the Bible, to be honest with you. I remember when I was a kid, they asked me, what's your favorite verse in the Bible? And you get this candy bar. And I remember saying that my favorite verse in the Bible is John 11:35. Jesus wept. It was the easiest verse. All I had to do is memorize 2 words, and I got a candy bar, and we got it. So he goes on and he says, John 11:36, the next verse, the Jews said, see how he loved him? Some of them were like really captured by his grieving for the loss of his friend. But then some other people said, could not he have opened the eyes of the blind? Could he not have kept this man from dying? Here's what's interesting. When we trust God's timing sometimes, or we don't trust God's plan sometimes, there's rarely in most of us a moment where we doubt God's power. And all these people, they said, see how much he loved him? And then they turned around and simply said, like, couldn't he could give sight to the blind. Couldn't he have kept him from dying? They didn't doubt his power. They doubted his timing. They just doubted that he would show up and do things. They wanted him to do the things that they wanted him to do. They wanted them to have the plan, them to have the timing, and God to do the trusting. But man, what happens next is kind of the culmination. It's kind of the bigger moments in the story, because Jesus' response isn't to them. It says this, he says to them, take away the stone. And that's a story we've heard recently, isn't it? I mean, just even a few weeks ago when we celebrated Easter, there was that moment where the stone rolled away. But he didn't say, roll away the stone and just kind of put it off to the side for his resurrection. He removed the stone. Here, he moves the stone aside, and he says in a loud voice, he says this, he shouted, at this point, he says to Martha, but Martha says, I'm sorry, the sister of the dead man, by this time, there's a bad odor. Like, Lazarus has been 4 days in the grave. Now there's a significance here in this, and I don't want to spend a ton of time unpacking it, but it's important for us to understand the reason he let 4 days go by. Because in their culture and their beliefs that the spirit of the person and the body of the person stayed together for 3 days. And so their belief was that after 4 days, man, this game's over. Right? There's no more hope. And when Jesus says, roll away the stone, and he says, and Martha goes, wait a minute, it's been 4 days, Jesus. There's no hope anymore in there. And all that's left is a powerful stench from death. Like, my brother's body has been in there for 4 days. They didn't have modern embalming techniques. They didn't have all of those things that would make that even presentable. They had nothing but rotting carcass in there. She said, if we move that stone, it's going to be terrible. And she didn't want to experience even more grief, having to experience again the death of her brother. But Jesus goes forward. They move the stone out of the way, and it says in verse 43, he says, when he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice. Another translation says that he shouted, right? He didn't go, hey, Lazarus, come on out here. Hey, buddy, come on out. And I want you to see something powerful, is that he didn't say, come back from the dead. He would have had tons of people coming out. But he spoke specifically to Lazarus, and he says, Lazarus, come out. And the dead man came out, and his hands and his feet were wrapped with straps of linen and his cloth around his face. That's pretty powerful plan, isn't it? So they struggled this whole time between trusting his timing, trusting his plan, trusting his timing, trusting his plan, and then his plan works out in his perfect timing. And here's what's powerful about it for you and me, what we're supposed to do with this. This is powerful stuff. He says in the last verse, he says, Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. You know what's interesting? I just want you to think about it. I mean, Jesus is God, and he literally opens up the grave, speaks to this body that they believe the spirit had fully separated from, that he's literally rotting inside. They're afraid of the smell, and he says, Lazarus, come out. And Lazarus comes out. And I want you to catch a little bit of detail here. He's bound in the hands and feet. He's bound with linen cloths around his face. He's hopping out like the Easter bunny, right? He's hopping out, and then Jesus says to them, unwrap him and let him go. Now, Jesus, 100% God, can do anything he wants to do. He raised Lazarus from the dead. Could he not have said, Lazarus, hey, get that stuff off of you and come out here? Could he not have said, hey, Lazarus, I've made those grave clothes disappear. Why don't you come out here and see us? He didn't do any of that. He left him wrapped up in the grave clothes and said, come out here, hopping awkwardly, right? Hopping out to this moment and then he tells the people, you unwrap him and let him go. I don't always trust God's timing in his plan. I struggle with it, to be honest with you. There are lots of times where I go, man, this wasn't the best moment for that. Why couldn't that have happened 2 weeks ago? Why couldn't that have happened tomorrow or next week or next month? Why couldn't I have held on to that loved one? Why could we have not avoided this whole pandemic? Why could we not have fill in the blank? Why couldn't we have fill in the blank? You get what I'm saying? That we don't have a way to trust it in a big way. But he tells us, listen, this is important. He says, come out of the grave, and then he tells you and I, the people around, to let him go. Here's the killer part. For you and I and the way we live, is that God in his infinitely perfect plan and all of his demonstrated sovereignty doesn't do all of the work. He leaves something for you and I to do. You know, part of the reason I struggle with the idea of trusting God is because I don't know what part I'm supposed to play. It's because I don't know what I'm supposed to do in it. Am I supposed to adjust my expectations to a point where I just lower them and never expect God to show up so I'm surprised? Am I supposed to have high expectations of God? Or in some way, am I just supposed to participate? Am I just supposed to watch and play a part when God does something amazing? And this is that story. This is that story when you and I get a chance to participate in setting the dead man free. Jesus didn't do all the work. What he really is asking for us to do is just offer our natural and trust him to offer his super. That's when we see supernatural things happen. When we trust God with our natural time, our natural talents, our natural treasures, when we trust God with the natural, he adds super. And then we get to see supernatural things happen. That's what we exist for as a church. You know, this may come as a surprise to you, but we don't exist to help people take their next step to going to church online. We exist to help people take their next step toward Jesus. We take our natural next step and trust God's perfect timing and perfect plan to add his super to our natural.
Thanks, Jeremy. I think there's something that every one of us can use to try to learn to trust God's plan and his timing. We've all got plenty of room to improve. We sure appreciate you viewing with us today. Whether you're local or far away, we're grateful that you would take your time out for it. Many of you have continued supporting week after week as we have been on location around our communities, and we're sure grateful for that. If you're continuing to do that, obviously you can use ourjourney.com to find the giving options. For those of you who are watching from far away, I know some of you have asked, and we're sure grateful if you would jump in with us and support our ministry here in West Tennessee. Next week we'll be on location for part 4, so join us, see where we land. Until then, have a great week.